18th century to the mid-19th century. And Whitechapel Bell Foundry was the oldest manufacturing enterprise in England, being founded in 1570. The popular symbol is the cross. It's quite surprising that crosses weren't so popular until the mid-19th century because of the close association with Roman Catholicism. Mid-19th century, Victoria's position as Protestant monarch is safely established. All the memories of civil war kind of faded, so the crosses become popular again, and today we see a lot of crosses, the regular ones like the one in front of me, and the Celtic cross, which is the cross given in a circle that represents eternity. Now another very popular symbol is the angel. We will have a lot of different types of angels. The angel looking upward symbolizes the flight of the soul heavenwards. We have a weeping angel, an angel with the trumpet, which symbolizes the resurrection day. At our cemetery we have one special angel, and I will show you later. The urn, or the draped urn. So in Roman times the urns would hold the ashes of the dead. In Christianity it became the last abode of the soul. The drape symbolizes the last partition between the death and the life and death. So many times we will see the urn half draped. It's to allow the soul to escape to heaven. Truncated column for someone who died in the prime of his life, so usually for young people. 3 steps like this pedestal behind me, like the 3 steps of Christian faith, faith, hope and charity. And I think these are the most popular. If you see something that you want to ask me, like symbols, this triangular shaped roof, and this is one of the biggest one. At the time it was also one of the most expensive floors of the cemetery. The reason is that it's close to the main path, very big, and it can hold 15 coffins. So in Victorian times, in life as in death, the social status is a very important thing to convey. So if you have a big grave, and such an imposing one, it tells something about your life and death. So this one belongs to the family of Sir Loftus Otway. He was a war commander, an officer that commanded the British forces during the peace. So in Roman times it's for the ashes,
yeah.
And usually you have them in the Catacombs or here in the front, and the Christianity is Okay, so we are looking at this plain upright gravestone, which belongs to Elizabeth Jackson, who is the first person to be buried at Highgate Cemetery. And the interment took place on 19th of May, 1839. And it was 3 years after London Cemetery Company, the company who was supposed to run the cemetery, was founded. And just to give you an example, that it took 3 years to organize and plan and build everything. Now, Elizabeth was died at the age of 33. The average age of the deceased at the cemetery at the first year was 45, and we need to bear in mind that we are talking about upper middle class. For the working class it was 35, and a quarter of the deceased were children that didn't reach the age of 5, so the child mortality was very high. We don't know the cause of Elizabeth's death, but usually the most common cause was disease, and we had epidemics of cholera and smallpox and scarlet fever. For instance, Elizabeth here is buried together with her husband and his second wife. They died in 1854. 1854 is a very important year for epidemiology because this year Dr. John Snow discovered the cause of cholera. So it happened in Soho, in Broadwick Street. It was Broad Street then. And actually what he did, he closed the neighborhood pump. So once he closed the pump, the number of cases of cholera decreased, and that's how he proved that the source of cholera was in water and not in the air like many believe. Another thing that happened in 1850s was the closure of all the public cemeteries in central London. So all the church graveyards, burial grounds, vaults, everything was closed, and actually what do? You either go here to this Magnificent Seven if you have money, and if you don't have money, you go to Brookwood Cemetery, which is in Surrey, and there was a train called the Necropolis train. And there was a train station near Waterloo Station, which was for these burial trains. And in this train there were like places for the upper classes and places for the poor. And that's what you did after 1850s. So it was another solution for the problems of overcrowding during the 19th century. Okay, so this was the first grave of Highgate Cemetery, and now we are going to see the first attraction of it, which was the architecture, and the place we are going to see called the Egyptian Avenue. Right, so as I said, Highgate was a commercial enterprise, and the aim was to attract as much clients as possible. And one of the major attractions was architecture. One of the founders of the cemetery was Stephen Geary, and he was an architect. He was responsible for the invention of the pavement in London, and also for the opening of the gin palaces, of the first gin palace in London. And among other things, he was one of the founders of this cemetery, and he thought that a complex in Egyptian style would be particularly appealing to the public taste, because this was the time when everyone was fascinated with everything Egyptian. We are talking about the period 1820s, the discovery of the Valley of the King, the Rosetta Stone was just brought to London, and all these Egyptian things, obelisks, tombs, so everyone was really fascinated with them. So we have columns with the lotus petals, we have broken obelisks, and we have this archway in Egyptian style as well. So originally this passage was covered by the roof. It proved to be too dark even for Victorians, and the walls took too long to sell, so it was decided to take the roof off. to take the roof off. As you can see, nowadays we have this improvised natural roof, and it's still dark. So most of the vaults, and there are 16 of them in this passage, most of them are still empty, right? So every vault is for 12 coffins. They're quite big, but not so popular. There is one particular very interesting dweller in them, and it's a spider. It's a very rare spider. His name is orb-weaving spider, or Metaburnetti, and it is the first site in London it was spotted. Now, they live in complete darkness, so we can safely pass. They never leave the vaults. Don't worry, it's completely safe. Okay. Which was on the territory of the cemetery in the 18th century. William Ashworth was one of the founders of the Bank of England and the Mayor of London, and he had his estate here. So the tree might be from this time, and also the eagles that we see here on the columns, the last remnants of Ashworth's estate. Otherwise, the tree is still going, and you can see that the circle forms a kind of gigantic pot befitting the size of the tree. And it's kind of a bonsai tree now because it's also very straight and everything is circle. Last winter was quite a disaster, not the last one, the 2016. Vandalism is still going on at this cemetery, but in the mid-20th century, it was really a scourge of this place. So what happened is that at the beginning of 20th century, the cemetery started to fill up, and it became unprofitable. So the original company decided after the Second World War, actually it was a decision even, so they went bankrupt. Okay, and the original company was closed, and the cemetery was completely, well, it was run by the city council, but because the city council after the Second World War had bigger problems to solve, it was completely abandoned. It was not maintained at all, and we are talking about 30 periods of completely when the cemetery was completely abandoned. And here we have the example of what happened to the tombs and the vaults. So people that wandered around freely, so the cemetery was open for everyone, and people came here to look for the things to loot, and there were some occult stories going around, and many things, many vaults unfortunately had been vandalized. In 1974, the charity was formed. It's the same charity that runs the cemetery up until today. And actually, out of all the Magnificent Seven, there are only 2 cemeteries that are not run by the city council right now. These are Kensal Green, the first cemetery, and this cemetery. And you can see the difference. When you go to the others, you can see the difference between the level of maintenance. Okay? So, roof of this catacomb.
Whenever you're ready, yeah?
Yeah, okay, thanks. So, if we look this direction nowadays, we cannot see anything. But once we could have seen St. Paul and all East London. It was one of the best views of the cemetery because we are at the highest point of it. And actually this terrace was the most popular place to take a stroll. And as you may know, ladies would not attend the burials themselves because it was too disturbing for ladies. So they would take a stroll at the terrace of the catacombs. It's also quite remarkable because it has an asphalt roof. And it's one of the oldest asphalt roofs surviving. And it's said that Isambard Brunel, the famous engineering giant of 19th century, had been involved in the construction of the roof. Okay, now we are going inside. It's a dark place, dark, narrow place. It's only lit by the skylight. If you don't like this type of places, please wait outside. It will take 5 minutes. If you're alright, please be careful and give your eyes like some time. It gets some time to get used to the darkness. Okay? But the wooden layer is so this would be like a family research. Okay, so This group of vaults actually belongs to the original architecture of the cemetery and supposed to be in keeping with the Egyptian